Hello from Jonathan and from me. Welcome to the programme.
First, the shocking catalogue of failures that led to the death of a severely disabled young man at one of the region's hospitals.
Kyle Flack from Stamford-le-Hope in Essex died at Basildon Hospital in 2006 when his head became trapped in the bars of his bed.
A court heard today how staff had been warned about the risk to Kyle but failed to supervise him properly, pass on information and assess the risk to their patient. Well, Victoria Webb joins us from Basildon Crown Court now. Victoria, a number of revelations in court today then.
Yes, it's actually the first time we've heard so many details about this case. Kyle Flack has been described as a people magnet, someone who loved life, but he was a young man with severe disabilities. And in October 2006, he was admitted to Basildon University Hospital with stomach problems, something he had been admitted for in the past. But this time, a number of failures, mainly centring around a breakdown in communication amongst staff, led to his death. And in court today, we heard how it could have so easily been avoided. This is the hospital bed where Kyle Flack died. A bed that, according to the Health and Safety Executive, was equipped with adult rails completely unsuited to his needs. Although he was 20, Kyle, who was blind, deaf and unable to move his arms and legs, had the body of a 12-year-old boy, and the hospital had been told he had a tendency to wriggle his head between the bars, information that wasn't passed between staff. For his family, today should have marked the end of a 4-year fight for justice, but they still have several weeks to wait for the sentencing.
What has happened, my son is dead. No matter what happens today, my son will never, ever be brought back to me, and I've got to live with that.
Kyle was admitted to hospital on the 10th of October 2006 with stomach troubles. During the following night, he was found several times lying diagonally in his bed with his head wedged between the mattress and the rails. The first 2 times it happened, he was repositioned by nurses. But later, despite concerns being raised by a passing cleaner, he claims no action was taken by medical staff. At 8:20 the next morning, Kyle was found lying with his head trapped between the bottom rail and the mattress. Attempts were made to resuscitate him, but he was dead. Earlier this year, the Trust admitted failing to ensure the health and safety of patients in its care. The Health and Safety Executive said that Kyle Flack's death was entirely preventable and would not have happened if the bed he was in had been fitted with child-sized bars. The Trust admitted its main failure was that it didn't properly risk assess Kyle when he arrived, which would have led to one-to-one supervision. The Chief Executive, Alan Whittle, was in court today for the proceedings.
We'll be making a statement when the sentencing occurs on the 8th of June. Nothing further to say today.
A number of steps have been taken at the hospital since October 2006 to improve procedures, but Gillian says it shouldn't have taken her son's death for the Trust to make these important changes. Victoria Webb, Anglia News, Basildon.
Now, we've known the cuts were on the way, and today the new Chancellor spelled out how he plans to save more than £6 billion.
The savings will come in many forms, from child trust funds right up to the scrapping of entire government agencies. Rhiannon Mills has been looking at what it might mean for our region.
Since the recession hit, we've all had to look at where we can make a saving. Today, it was the government's turn, announcing spending cuts of £6.2 billion. One of the casualties could be the number of students studying here in Colchester. £200 million is being shaved off the higher education budget. The University of Essex trying to stay positive.
We're always in a state of planning for the future, and clearly there are mechanisms that we could adopt if we have to make savings, and we're aware of what some of those might be. But for the moment, what we're doing is ensuring that our students have an excellent education, that we maintain the quality of student experience at the University of Essex.
There are some sweeteners. Spending in the classroom and on health services will be protected. So what is in the Chancellor's sights? There are few details, but among the worst hit are likely to be transport, local authorities and a general freeze on civil service jobs. Many in Cambridge want more savings.
I think we could probably afford to cut a bit more now.
Whatever they do, they probably can't win, to be honest.
Absolutely no choice, no. It's going to be a lot more than that before it's finished.
Business leaders like John Bridge say it's a fraction of what the private sector in our region has already cut.
Everybody enjoys the spending part and nobody enjoys the cuts. And they are painful, they are difficult, but we have to be realistic and make sure that the UK PLC finances are robust.
Critics have already accused the government of dressing up these cutbacks, not making it clear exactly how it's going to affect jobs and families. But with the UK's budget deficit estimated at over £150 billion, it's clear we're not going to be able to escape those savings. Rhiannon Mills, Anglia News in Cambridge.
So then, when will we get more detail on the impact of the cuts right here in the East? That's the question we put to our political correspondent, Matthew Hudson, just a little earlier.
Jonathan, it's very difficult to say. We're seeing a kind of trickle-down effect at the moment where the Treasury has told the departments how much they have to save, and they will look at their component parts and make those savings. As an example, the country's regional development agencies have a national budget of £1.7 billion. They've got to save £270 million. We don't know how much of that will affect the East of England Development Agency or where it will implement those cuts. So expect to see announcements over the coming weeks and months about exactly where the axe will fall. Expect also to see a lot of very unhappy people in the public sector.
OK, thanks very much, Matthew. Meanwhile, plans for a second runway at Stansted have been withdrawn by the airport's operator. BAA made the announcement today after the government said it wouldn't support the plans. It means that a scheme to buy property in the affected area has also been withdrawn. The project has cost BAA around £190 million.
Now then, it was a truly astonishing military feat, the evacuation of almost 350,000 Allied troops from the beaches at Dunkirk in France.
In May 1940, hundreds of small boats, many from our region, headed across the Channel to help bring soldiers home.
Well, 70 years on, some of these surviving boats will sail from Ramsgate in Kent to Dunkirk on Thursday.
In the first of a series of reports about Dunkirk, Malcolm Robertson's been on board one of the boats in Suffolk.
At Newson's boatyard in Lowestoft, they're making sure she's absolutely ready for her big day. MTB 102 is a shining example of British craftsmanship and the dedication of enthusiasts who keep alive this grand old lady of the Royal Navy. It's exactly 70 years since she lined up alongside scores of other little boats in the dramatic rescue of hundreds of thousands of British and Allied troops from the beaches at Dunkirk. Now this motor torpedo boat is making a sentimental return and will be at the very head of the flotilla that arrives in the French port on Thursday afternoon. An enthusiastic farewell as she sailed out of Lowestoft for Saturday's sea trial, but nothing compared to what she and the rest of the Armada will receive when they arrive in France.
For the last 15 years we've actually brought that back up to standard, the way this boat would have been built in the first place, and she's a testament at 72 years old that she can still black around at 24, 26 knots with ease.
As she proved with an impressive workout at the weekend, it's hard to believe that not so long ago, neglected, her days seemed numbered. But the MTB 102 Trust took over the task of looking after and refurbishing her, and now she's as good as new. Today she has a top speed of 27 knots, but back in 1940, with different engines, she could reach up to 50, which made her the fastest boat in the British Navy, and as such, she was able to play a pivotal role in the Dunkirk evacuation. Back and forth, she went across the Channel during those dramatic few days, possibly as many as 9 times. Such was her speed, she could do England to France in just half an hour.
She was carrying dispatches from Dunkirk to Dover because communications were not particularly good at the time. On one occasion she brought back 20 troops, but her role at Dunkirk was not as a vessel to bring the troops back. She was there to coordinate the effort to get as many back as possible.
Thursday's anniversary crossing of the Channel will be at a much more leisurely pace, a top speed of just 8 knots. She'll fly her own distinctive flag, but by far the more interesting one is tucked away downstairs, a legacy of when Rear Admiral William Waite Walker, who was in charge of the Dunkirk operation, adopted her as his flagship after the destroyer HMS Keith was destroyed by a bomb.
When the crews realised they had an admiral on board, they hastily made an admiral's flag out of a Royal Navy dishcloth and asked permission to fly it, and it was hoisted up the mast. And so for the last 3 days of the evacuation, 102 was running in and out of Dunkirk with a Navy dishcloth at the head of the mast.
She was built for speed, and more than 70 years later, she's hardly lost any of that. And how good she'll look at the head of the pack, making that emotional return voyage into Dunkirk. Malcolm Robertson, Anglia News, on board MTB 102 off the Suffolk coast.
Very special sight.
Yeah, and we hope to be on board the 102 as she makes that emotional return to Dunkirk on Thursday.
It's all part of our coverage all this week of events to mark the 70th anniversary of the evacuation.
Tomorrow, the story of the 97 soldiers from the Royal Norfolk Regiment shot dead after surrendering